Recording.
Good evening. Thank you for coming here tonight. This is sort of a quick refresher course. I have put together a presentation that talks about transportation in Virginia. This is simply 4 slides out of that presentation, but they're important. We are the Taxed Enough Already organization, and sometimes we need to understand the relationships that are working so hard behind the scenes to tax us even more. So, as Homer Simpson is pondering in this picture, back in the day when I was being taught by my parents what was right and wrong, they explained to me that bribery was when you gave officials money in return for them doing things for you. Today we call that lobbying, and today legislators have made that legal. It may not be a crime, but the question is, where are ethics? And the bigger question is, who is it that the people we elect represent? Well, they represent us. They're there to do our bidding. We're not here to fund them, to give the money to the donors that paid them in order to get elected. And particularly since we have some political people getting up tonight, that's very important when we look at the political season and understand who is it that those elected representatives are actually representing. Next slide, please. So I'm really going to talk to this particular slide without going into details. This slide took me about 13 years to understand through research, through going to meetings, through meeting people like you at these meetings, from listening to politicians and reading and reading and reading some more. We live in a fantastic age. Everything you could ever want to know is online, but you have to take the time to go read it. And if you do take the time to read it, you discover that what you're being told by the media is not actually the truth. And what you're being told by your elected representatives is seldom the truth, or it's a part of the truth, absent the rest of the truth. And as a Tea Party, that's one of the things everybody in this room struggles with. So, what you'll notice in this picture is this is you, right here in the center of this elaborate machine to take the money that you earn and the property that you have away from you. The function of our government in the United States is to protect your property, and your money is as much your property as your home, your car, or your land. Property is your wealth. So, of course, we're all familiar with the very basics of fundamental taxation. We all, in the Tea Party, we have local taxes, and we have a state that we have, and we have state taxes, and then we have federal taxes, and we're going to talk a little bit about regional taxes. But what you also don't understand is you have many, many other forms of taxation as it keeps growing and growing in the form of fees, and in the form of tolls, and in the form of stealth taxes, where a retail tax is placed on an item that you buy and you don't even understand that you've already paid the tax before at the wholesale level. And so there are hidden taxes on top of taxes. So what do we have here, and why is this important? What you need to understand is this is a machine. This machine turns out the very agenda that everybody in this room is trying to fight. And what's really important about this slide, if you look at it, is this picture right up here in this corner, and the role of the media. And that was something I had a very difficult time understanding until I went to work for the media. I worked for a media company. And once I began to understand how we made our money, I began to understand why it is that the newspapers promote things that are of no benefit to the rest of us. Things that are subsidized with our tax money, things like light rail. More importantly is to understand that there's this concept of grants. And under these grants, which is a fancy way of saying your money was taken from you, handed off to a government group, who in turn give it to a not-for-profit organization, who then in turn takes that money and purchases advertising along with the businesses from the media. And they set up layers and layers of phony organizations to launder your tax money. It is a way of trying to circumvent the law so that they can legally use your money to advocate and promote a position which is not to your benefit or interest. And in the case of what's coming up this fall, and in the case of Virginia Beach, when we do a referendum and the voters go to the ballot and take a position on an initiative, that should be direction to our representatives in power to do what we directed them to do. It's a vote, but it's not. Instead, we find our tax money being laundered through the media to convince us of something we don't want to do. So let's take a look at this. Public-private partnerships. This is a growing problem systemically, not just in Virginia or Tidewater, but globally. This concept of the business entity being a partner with your elected representative in your government is wrong. And it's at the core of what's happening to us, which is why we have no voice. If you're in business, you have a thing called a fiduciary responsibility, and that's to the stakeholders of your business. In your local government, the fiduciary responsibility is to you. That's your representative. They should always be acting in your interest. But if you're in a business and you're on the board of directors of a business, your fiduciary responsibility is to the stakeholders of the business. Public-private partnerships completely blur the lines of how an elected official has to make a decision. What happens when the decision is not in the best interest of their business partner under a public-private partnership, but it is in the best interest of their constituents for whom they purport to represent? In Virginia Beach, over and over, we have witnessed that the decision goes for the benefit of the business partner in the public-private partnership, and not for the benefit of the residents of Virginia Beach. And it's the same at the state level and at the national level. So public-private partnerships are wrong. How do we have them? The General Assembly created them. How did the General Assembly create them? Lobbyists wrote the bills, gave them money to fund their campaigns. The General Assembly created the public-private acts, that we have several of those in our legislation, which made it legal. And here we are. So what you have over here is the Chamber of Commerce. And today, unfortunately, that's become crony capitalism. And what that means in simple terms is, if I need to compete in my business and I don't participate in the Chamber of Commerce and I don't lobby with significant amounts of money collectively to my elected officials, I'm at a competitive disadvantage in my business because my competitors are doing that. And so they're getting the laws and the bills written in their benefit. Now, you might say, how does that affect every one of us with taxes? Well, folks, everyone should be paying their fair share of taxes. The Tea Party is not about not paying taxes. It's about paying the right amount of taxes for the things government should be providing, for the services it's required to provide. We're not anti-tax. What we are is we're taxed too much and we don't get back the things that government should be providing. So part of this whole issue with the Chamber of Commerce is they're behind creating, and you might not notice the shirt I'm wearing tonight, but this shirt is an official shirt of the Central Business District Association. I was a member of the Central Business District Association for about 5 years because my office was in what's now Town Center. And as a member of that, we were an active lobby to go out and create things that promoted benefits to the businesses in Town Center. But that promotion was at the cost of paying our fair share of taxes, number one, to get exemptions in the law, and number two, to get an unfair share of taxes to subsidize what should have been a normal business expense. It's ridiculous, but it's a cycle, because the bankers sit down here at the bottom, and all of these projects that they promote, like light rail for $1 billion, the developers don't have the money to buy that. They borrow the money from the bank. The city doesn't have the money to build it, so they float bonds, which is a note from the bank. And all of this money flows back and forth between the bankers, Chamber of Commerce, and certain special interests, and that money, they siphon off a small amount. It doesn't take a lot of money to bribe public officials during a campaign, and they call it campaign donations. The donations go up to the politicians create the backroom deals that are done. They in turn issue the loans, the banks, the deposits, the money that sits in the bank, interest on top of that, and that money goes out in the grants that funds their phony organizations that promote these schemes, and it goes around and around and around. And what you find is your money is what you're fighting. It's your money. You pay for every bit of this just like I do. And then we have to go out to all the meetings and fight it with our time and energy and try to raise more money to counter this machine. Now this is the problem. This is the problem. So we need to fix this. And I know we're all busy fighting the little Pyrrhic battles that we fight, and we get wrapped up in the distractions of elections, and we get wrapped up in light rail, and we get wrapped up in whatever the particular issue is of the day. But if we don't stop this, we will never, ever stop the cycle. So what do we have in here? Taxes, fees, and tolls, and a cycle where our own money is being used to pay for this machine. Would you click the next slide, please? So in Virginia, we all think that this is what our government is. And this is enough government. If you believe in limited government, this is enough government. You have a state, right? Dillon Rule State. We have a local government. That's our General Assembly, and we have a federal government to provide for the common defense. And this is what we think we have. Click the picture. But this is what we actually have. And we have this because of the unholy alliance between the federal government and the state taking our money out of us and then bribing the state officials back with our own money from the federal level. If you don't do this behavior, I'll withhold federal taxation that you're using to subsidize your schools and your roads and whatever else. Yet it was our money in the first place. So we have all of this complicated regional government and General Assembly and appointed Commonwealth Transportation Board and Environmental Quality and the EPA who are partnered and an international government through the United Nations and the Federal Highway and all of this stuff. But all of this stuff is taking your money, and you're paying for this. But instead of it actually providing the service it's supposed to provide, it's a lobby. It's a lobby. And that's what we end up fighting over. Next slide, please. And my last slide. So, we're being crushed in Virginia by this bureaucracy funded by public-private partnerships, crony capitalists in bed with the elected officials who in turn provide the tax breaks and the tax subsidies. The result of that is we pay more because, one, they're not paying their fair share, and two, they're diverting the money that was supposed to go to the functions we paid for, our local schools, our roads, the things that government should provide, and that money instead is going to something else. Last slide, please. So in conclusion, the thing you need to understand about this, and why I want to reinforce this tonight, because we forget about this. This is the battle. If we cannot stop this, this will go on until we're just simply serfs. We will return to a feudal system. Very, very few rich, a whole lot of poor, and no middle class, which is what made our country great. What we have here is the General Assembly at our state level creating all of this bureaucracy because of this machinery. And we have international and national lobbies on K Street at the federal government writing the laws that create the very machinery that funds all of this, like light rail. And together, those two entities, the lobbying of global firms and international business, crony capitalists, combined with our state level General Assembly, who take that money in order to win campaigns, it doesn't take a lot. If you commit to giving $5,000 in each campaign, you get a lot of access in return for that $5,000. But more importantly, if you look at our town center or our light rail, you get hundreds of millions of dollars back in the form of either subsidies, outright grants, or tax relief, meaning that you're not paying the taxes you should have, which means everybody in this room has to make up the difference. So I will wrap it up with that, but I just wanted to remind us, this is what we have to deal with. And if we don't come together and put a plan in place to stop this, the rest of it is simply chasing our tails. And that's really what I wanted to say, so thank you.